This is the Free Spirits of L&D podcast, where we talk about life as a freelancer in the fascinating world of learning and development, and ask our guests all the questions you wanted to know but were maybe too afraid to ask. Yes, we even talk about how we get business and what we all charge. At the end of each episode, each guest gets to set a bonus question for the next one. So whether you're thinking about taking the leap, brand new to freelancing, or an experienced freelancer, you won't want to miss this. Today's guest on the Free Spirits of L&D podcast is Emma Coller. Emma is an ex-police officer turned executive coach, consultant and facilitator, and co-founder of Growth Pod, which is a leadership development business based in Yorkshire. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Is it fair to say ex-police officer? Do you ever stop being a police officer?
I think it's better if you say retired, because when you say ex, it sounds like you've been up to no good and somebody kicked you out.
Well, maybe we should start there in that case. Should we start with a bit about your story from police into freelancing in the L&D world? What was that all about?
Yeah, it does sound like a really odd jump, doesn't it, from police to owner of an L&D company, definitely. So I think of my life in two careers. So my first career in policing, and then my second career in terms of where I am now. So my first career in policing, I spent most of my policing career in L&D, which is why it's not unusual that I guess I do what I do now. So I joined the police service, did the usual on the beat, and I've worked in lots of very interesting and different departments. But the majority of my career I spent in training. So I started in new recruit training, so teaching all those who were just joining the police, teaching all the law, the legislation, and then moved into community policing. So at the time, it was very much around how do we work collaboratively and in partnership with other agencies, which sounds really crazy now, but people didn't know how to do it at that point. The police very much led the way and thought that they could do everything. So we had to pull them back and work out how do we work in partnership. And a bit of a side story, but one of my favourite models of all times, I'm a bit of a geek around models and theories, and I've got a favourite one. And I first came across that when I was delivering that collaborative police training, and it's still my favourite tool now. And just in case you're wondering, it's Appreciative Inquiry by David Cooper Ryder. And we used it a lot in partnership training. It was a really fabulous tool. And then I sort of specialised even further, moved more into sort of diversity, equality and inclusion training, and then started in the leadership space, which I started to learn around, different things around leadership models, coaching, not coaching as I do now, but sort of being introduced into the concept of coaching and mentorship. And so, yeah, that's kind of and then I retired. So my career within policing. So on retirement, although I did retire early because I was medically retired due to having brain surgery. So I didn't finish my full career. It was just, I guess, the next normal thing for me. It just seemed like that would be the next step. It wasn't an easy step, but that was what kind of landed me, I guess, into this L&D world.
Yeah, I'm glad you left off there, because when I think back to how we met each other, it was over 10 years ago, well over 10 years ago, actually. And it was on a coaching course. It was actually doing our ILM training together. I just sat down next to you and started chatting, and you started telling me about all this story about, this police other career life that you'd had. And this was your first forays into a very different space. And I just thought, yeah, how fascinating is that? And also seeing how you are now in this L&D world compared to how you were back then in that training room, being nervous about how to get the prices right and think about pitching for business. It's incredible to see everything that you've built in that space.
It feels like a different life. I think that's why I sometimes talk about these two careers, because although they are very interlinked, it's so different. So as I retired from the police, and when we first met on that programme, I was really fortunate to be working for the company that we did our training through. So they were really, really kind to me. I knew them and they offered me a job. And moving from policing, this kind of very insular world really in public sector to suddenly being opened up to this commercial space of leadership and what this could offer was such an incredible eye opener. Like I didn't even know this world existed, and
Yeah.
even now, sort of 10 years on, uh, I'm still learning so much about private industry and this kind of big commercial world that we're in that as a police officer, you just never really get to know about. So, yeah, there's still lots of learning going on, but it was such a big springboard for me coming out and sort of having this safety of working for this company. Obviously, meeting you, and then I met Chris as well through that same process, my current business partner. I say current, as if I'm going to change that anytime soon. Obviously, I'm not. My business,
Yeah.
Chris, and then in terms of the movement forward.
So what went on in the middle then? So obviously now you've got a pretty established business. You and Chris run a really successful leadership development company, and you just told the part of the story where you'd gone from policing into kind of like associate work, really. But you were also employed by that company. Um, what happened in the middle?
I think when I first left the police and worked for that company, I obviously was really clueless about the business world. And I wouldn't be where I am now if it hadn't have been for that stepping stone. And as I got to know that world better, and I guess it's one of those things a lot of people go through where you kind of start with this mindset of, I think I could do this. And there was a lot of that going, I think I could do this. And actually, I really grew personally and with my confidence in starting to recognize that I was actually quite good at doing what I was doing. And there was a bit of me that I probably would have never got to that thought, yeah, I can do this by myself. So I started to work by myself initially. So when we were on our coaching program, our ILM training, I started to come up with ideas around names and what I would do and how I might work by myself. And that, I guess, was a seed that just wouldn't stop growing. And so I started to do a little bit of that by myself and created some more confidence in that space. And then I met Chris. And Chris, he was a student on one of my courses, also a coaching course. And he said, I really like some of the way, I really like the way in which you work. I like the way in which you present. I've really enjoyed the program. And he was just leaving the military at that point. And he said, I wonder if we could maybe bid for a bit of work together. I've got some opportunities and I quite like what you do. What do you think? And I thought at that point, I was like just saying yes to everything. I said, yeah, let's do it. So we bid for a bit of work jointly and we won some of the work. We won the contract. We started to work together, and that just continued. I think as a team, we became quite successful. And then 2019, we decided to make it official
Yeah.
and create the business, register it, all that good stuff. And Growth Pod, I guess, was born. Yeah.
So and this, excuse me, this is a really nerdy question about bids because I've been a bit involved in that sort of space, but certainly not as in depth as I know you get to when it comes to bid writing and proposals. How were you submitting bids if you didn't have a company registered together? How did that work?
When we first started to work together, Chris kind of came under the banner of my business. So as we started to create bids and kind of put ourselves out for work, it came under my old company, which was called Considered Coaching and Training. And I think they got to a point, which is when Growth Pod started to evolve, that I think we just recognized from a protection perspective, as we started to earn some money, that this was becoming a real business. And we took some legal advice, and it was the options where we either kept Considered Coaching and Training, and Chris became a director of that, or I kept that as a separate entity, and we built a new company. Which, because of the advice we were given, we decided to build a new company. So rather than him becoming a director of my company, we created a joint company called Growth Pod. So the original work that we were doing sort of sat under Considered. And then when we realised that we wanted to work more permanently together, we started to move all of our clients and the work that we were doing under Growth Pod. But that was quite a short period of time, to be fair.
And when it comes to bids, because I do know some people who work in this space who are freelance in L&D and they just don't go near them. They're like, this is way too much work. There are like entire teams could be involved in doing this stuff. They don't touch them. How has that been for your business going forward? Has it helped being able to write bids? Has it been something that you would not do if you didn't have to? What's your view on that whole process?
So, tender writing is a complete art form and it's so difficult. So, when we first started, we were really fortunate that we managed to get onto an NHS framework. And as a result of being on that NHS framework, and it was, I can't remember how long it was for, but for several years, you stay on the framework and then they often retender. But once we were on there within the NHS, what they then do once you're on the framework is there's two ways in which you can be awarded work. So the first part of that is a direct award, and the second one is mini competitions or mini bids. So what they'll do is once you're on the framework, they'll then offer you work. So they'll say to you, we know that you are the only organisation that we've currently got on our books that can provide this particular service, and they'll directly award that service to you, that training. Or the other one is where there may be two or three people on the framework that do similar work, and you'll enter into this kind of mini competition with them. Now, because of the niche products that we were creating at that time, we were just directly awarded most of the work that we were doing. And that was really valuable at that point because it gave us a big client. So I remember quite early, we had this meeting with a potential new client in private industry. And one of the questions that he asked us was, he said, share with me all of the clients that you work with. And of course, we were really new and we couldn't do it. And it had a really lasting impact on both Chris and I, actually. We still talk about it to this day. Do you remember that time when that guy asked us that question? And we were both just a little bit embarrassed because we didn't have a really great list of people that we'd worked with at that point. So the fact that we got onto the NHS system meant that we were then able to say, we work with the NHS, we've worked with this trust and that trust. And of course, it is public service work. But because we got on there quite quickly, it helped us to sell our product wider, which was really helpful. However, we have put so many tenders in on the public sector frameworks and not done well at all. And we got to a point where we stopped doing them because we weren't successful and they take a long time to write. And then last year, we decided to pick it up and have another go with it. And we found a company who teach you how to write the bids. So our ops manager, Petra, she went on that program. So she learned all about how to structure your answers, how to potentially be more successful in bid writing. And we said, we'll give it one more turn. We'll give it one more sort of spin around, see what comes out. And just, in fact, this week, we have just been awarded a huge contract with the public service, with the NHS, so across the whole of the country. And we are now one of their main providers for coaching and mentoring services.
Amazing.
Which is incredible. I can't even believe that we've managed to get on it. But it was as a result of going through that training that meant that we were able to rewrite all of the bids and the way in which we were writing for those tenders. And obviously it worked. It was successful. And it's such a large contract. It's such a big piece of work that just the size of our business at the minute, we won't be writing for anymore because it's a three-year contract that we've won. So
it sounds like investing in learning how to write this stuff has really paid off.
Yeah. And I wish we'd done that at the start 10 years ago, because the amount of pain, Mark, it's caused us to put these things in and come, second or third. I mean, sometimes even lower than that, but we always felt we were just on the cusp of it. And then having the training meant that for like, all right, okay, we understand it much more clearly now. So yeah, that was really valuable.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And how about the process of kind of figuring out we want to work on this together, as opposed to us having two separate businesses and we just come together every now and again and collaborate on a project? How did you reach that agreement with Chris?
I think it was quite a natural process. We have both got really complementary strengths. And I think that's one of the reasons why it works. We don't do the same thing. So Chris is very strategic in his thinking. He's ex-military. He led the Ebola crisis. He's worked in Afghanistan, supported trauma hospitals. He's done some incredible work. And so from the work that he does or has done and what he brings to the business is very strategic. I'm not really a strategic thinker. I am a creative. I love delivering and writing training. So the way in which it works for us is he's very much at the front end, bringing business in. He's very good at going out and doing all the networking and finding the opportunities. And then he'll bring that in and say, Emma, we're going to be doing this. And I go, brilliant. And then that's where I'll pick it up. And then I'll start to design and we deliver it together. But I'm very much in that design space, which is my strength. So I think when I first started, it was really lonely. And I quickly realized that it's really hard to do by yourself. And so, whilst when I was with Considered Coaching and Training, I was, getting some work in, but it was hard work. And it's not my strength. I am a retired police officer. I get given things in the police service to do. I do it and I do a good job of it. But this whole kind of business side is I'm getting better at that, definitely, but it wasn't my space. And that was really clearly Chris's space. So I think that it was a bit lonely. And
Mm.
as we kind of developed our relationship and got to know each other better, we saw that we very quickly slotted into these two areas that were quite complementary. And so it was just a no brainer that we would just carry on working with each other.
Yeah, I remember having met you both together for the first time several years ago, being struck by how incredibly different you both were in terms of your outlooks and your mindsets and even the questions you asked of things. And that difference is absolutely complementary. I can see why it's worked so well. And I think that that issue of loneliness is a theme that's come up a lot on this podcast. It's one of the reasons why, and Kim was really keen to set up this community, this Free Spirits network, because everyone who enters this industry in a freelance capacity quickly realizes that there's very little that you can do by yourself without needing to come and ask somebody for help or advice or information or support. It's all about kind of community, and it's amazing that you and Chris have kind of have that built in already in the way that you've set the business up. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think we were just really, I mean, there is a bit of luck in anything that you do, isn't there? Um, I think we were looking in that our skill set just sat really neatly in those two areas. So there is, of course, a crossover with everything that we do, but I guess we know each other's lanes quite well. And there's times when we can kind of just rub out the lines in the lane, but we also know when we need to go back in them as well, because we know when we can bring our best to the business. And we're really mindful of that.
Now, are you quite kind of structured with that then? So, you were talking earlier on about different personal strengths that you bring to that setup. Are you quite avert with saying, okay, Chris, I want you, you're the guy who goes out and wins all the work and brings those contacts back and does that sort of external facing stuff, and I will be your creative output and be there delivering on the ground and running these workshops and designing these workshops with clients? Do you kind of have that as a formal agreement between the two of you, or do you just kind of work it out as you go along? How does that part tend to work?
We did not know that to start off with. Even as you asked me to come on this and talk about my journey so far, one of the things I was thinking about was how it's taken us quite a long time to actually settle into understanding what we do, which sounds a bit of an odd thing to say.
Yeah.
We've been working together, I mean, formally for 7 years, but it was longer than that. We didn't really know what we did to start off with in terms of the business. And we've spent quite a number of those 7 years kind of just refining what it is that we do and what our offering is, and thinking about, what there was a lot of stuff around the elevator pitch. If you had to define what you do, what is it? What's the brand? And as we've gone through the process of that, I think that's when we became more consciously aware of these different roles that we hold. And one of the things that really triggered that for us, and we're just about to redesign our website, but when we looked at our website last time and we talked about what we did, it became more clear when we tried to describe ourselves. So Chris became strategic director, I became director of learning and development. And actually just putting those titles against what we were doing created this awareness of, oh, okay, that's what you do and that's what I do. So we can't, obviously we knew that that's what we were doing, but we didn't name it as that. And
Yeah.
so now it's named, and we now talk about that. So when we're meeting new clients, when we're pitching for work, we're really clear about where our skill sets lie and how we will contribute to the work that we do within a business.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was listening to a podcast the other day about marriage and like how the dynamics in a marriage tend to work. And often, this is like a marriage therapist who was talking about how oftentimes in a marriage, and I'm not saying that you and Chris are like a married couple, but hear me out on this one, right? So, like, oftentimes there'd be like a breakdown in communication over who's doing which jobs. Like, so if someone's like always does the laundry and then one person just steps in and does it all of a sudden thinking they're being helpful and actually they do a really bad job of it, that's not very great long term and can lead to issues. And she was saying actually one of the best things to do is just have a almost like a not a written contract, but you could have a verbal contract of saying, this is my stuff. Let's play to our strengths. You do that bit. And if we ever have to cross over, we need to talk about it. But ideally we don't, because then everyone knows where they stand. And I thought about it for a long time. And I was thinking, actually, there's so many aspects of business that are like that. When you have like long-term collaborative partners, often it's just unsaid. And often when it is said, it makes things much more simple and much easier.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we run all of our projects on a Asana. We use a project management tool,
Oh
Asana.
yeah.
We're really clear about what our actions are when we're working on any projects. So whatever client we're working on, we're really clear about what we're both doing around that. But I also think that we work with lots of businesses. So yes, we teach different leadership, coaching skills, well-being, that kind of thing. But we do a lot of consultancy work as well. And one of the big things that people talk about is the challenge of silo working. Oh, we're in silos, everybody's in silo working. And people see it as being a really negative thing. Usually, what they mean is their teams cross department and not collaborating. That's different. But often, when they talk about silo working, I always say that there is a reason why we have silos. Like
Mm.
silos is an actual thing. They're a container to hold something that doesn't
Yeah.
contaminate. So actually, there is a real need for silo working on occasion so that we don't create duplication or cross contamination. And it's important to recognize that there are times when we do need to stay in our lane because that's our strength. And then there are times when we need to just kind of rub out the lines and come together, collaborate
Hmm.
for the bigger good of whatever it is that we're delivering. So I think that Chris and I have just naturally been able to work that out. Maybe if there was more people in the business, it might change the dynamics of that. But the fact that there was two of us to start with as directors probably made it quite simple.
Hmm.
Uh, but even then, I think it is important to recognise that being in a silo actually can be quite helpful sometimes because, as you said, it stops you from duplicating or getting in each other's way.
Yeah. Back in another professional life, I used to do a lot of work in like the petrochemicals industry. And they would very intentionally design their teams to be in silos for that same reason. Like R&D departments would be kept like geographically and just cut off from everyone else because they had a tendency just to disrupt everything and ask tons of questions that a lot of people got really irritated by. But that was their job. It was to kind of question and innovate and consider what if and how about. So they left all the kind of the production areas of the business just completely by themselves again, so they could just get on and work on the deliverables and the outputs, whereas these other teams were kept kind of protected and guarded miles away from everybody else.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
at what point do you come together and at what point do you go back again? There's almost
Yeah.
a down movement of that, isn't there? Of making sure we
Mm,
get that right. So when we know our North Star and where we're going to, what our outcomes are, and we understand how we work collectively without going into training systems thinking, is that knowing when do we come together for what reason, for what purpose, And once we've got our purpose and we understand how we're all working towards the same outcome, then we might spend some time back in our silos. Then we might come back
Mm.
together. It's like the rhythm of the dance.
Yeah. Yeah. Image of Michael Flatley just popped into my head for some reason. But it is, you're right. On our last episode, we heard from Sarah Duxbury, and she set a question for our next guest, not knowing that it would be you, which was, what have you learned to say no to and why?
Okay, that's a great question. When we first got started, we gave a lot away. We gave a lot of our training away, a lot of our time away. And that was essential. We needed to do that. So, again, as I mentioned before, still feeling the feelings from that person who said, "Who have you worked with?" Some of that for us was about being able to create a client list and have clients work with us so we could then basically earn more work. And that's a real shame actually in this industry, but it's definitely there that they want you to be able to prove that you've worked with other clients. And it's like chicken and egg. How do you get the client without have clients? So we gave a lot of work away. We definitely did do that. We ran webinars and provided free training, free coaching. And I think over the past few years, one of the things that we've learned to say no to is giving things away for free. Now, that's not to say that we don't, because we still do. So, for example, I coached, I think, 3 or 4 people last year for free because, they were people that were in my network, they needed it, and will absolutely always support. But even this week, a very big company came to Chris and said, we'd like to, he does quite a lot of inspirational speaking, so he's kind of on that professional speaker circuit. And they said, "Oh, we'd really like to come and do a speech in London for this big event. Would you be up for it?" And he said, um, absolutely. And the first question was, "What's your budget?" And this person said, "Well, we don't have one." And he said, "Okay, well, I'm really grateful that you've asked me. And if you find that you do have a budget at some point, I'd be really happy to come and support on that piece of work." Now, that is a big company who probably do have a budget and could have paid. And so that's one of the big things that we've learned to say no to. Because previously, and sometimes it's exciting, sometimes it's interesting, and you think you always have to weigh up the balance of, okay, I might not be paid financially from this, but could I be paid in some other way? And sometimes you are paid in marketing or some other process. But I think that's one of the biggest things that we've learned to say no to is giving our value away. But yeah, that's been something that I think we've had to spend a lot of time thinking about. And it's a process, I think, that you go through over time.
It is. It is. Especially because, and we have touched on this in a previous podcast about sort of the dynamics of saying no and all the stuff that goes on in here when you have to say no to somebody. Because especially when you're a freelancer, they're asking you for your thing and it's personal to you and they want you. And saying no, would they ever ask again? Would that ever opportunity ever come up again? Is this going to damage my relationship with that person forever? And in some cases, the answer might be yes, and you have to be okay with that. I had an amazing mentor once who always used to challenge me whenever I brought an opportunity to them. And she always used to say, "What is the cost of saying yes?"
Mm.
That was one of the ones that's really stayed with me because often when you say yes to something, it means saying no to something else that might come up, that might be way more valuable or it may be more exciting. And if you have to say no to that because you're saying yes to something else, that might help it make it easier for you to say no to that first thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I know someone who actually that's their saying, and I remember that resonating was, "If you say yes to this, what are you saying no to?"
Mm.
I think when we first started out, we said yes because if you say yes to this, you're saying no to something else. We didn't have the other thing to say no to.
Yeah.
That was the thing. So now we have got so much going on and
Mm.
lots of clients and customers. So actually now in saying no to things, it's with a really clear intention. It's knowing where the business is going, what we want to achieve within our business. We've got our guiding North Star. And so that that's really clear now for us. So we know what to say yes and what to say no to. And I think when you first start, you don't have that guiding star. Because as I said, it took us quite a long time to refine the offer and what we actually did as a business.
Thanks, Emma. And thank you, Sarah, for the question. Did you want to set a question for our next guest?
Yes. So my question relates to something that I do every year. So at the beginning of the year, I'm not one for resolutions, but what I really like to do is I like to have a word that sits within my North Star that guides how I want to experience my year. So rather than it being a very specific resolution, it's a word. So I always choose three words. So one is for me personally, one is around my health, and then one is for the business. And it changes every year, obviously, based on the focus of what I want this year to feel, look like for it, what I want to experience this year.
Yeah.
So my question for the next guest, whoever that might be, is what would be your North Star word that would guide your decision making this year? That's probably a long, a long question, but
No, it's a really lovely, succinct question. And this will be going out in January of this year. So it's perfectly timed as well for anyone who's not quite zeroed in on that type of thing yet or has never done it before. Are you happy sharing what yours is?
yeah, absolutely. So,
Okay.
my personal question, sorry, my personal word for this year is adventure. So, in about 2 weeks, I'm going to be 50, and I can't quite believe it. And I'm very excited that I get to be 50, is how I'm currently reframing my big birthday. So adventure is my personal word because I want to have lots and lots of adventures this year. And as someone who is very nearly 50, a few weeks away, I should apparently be able to do 10 press ups. So my health word this year is strong. Now, for the business, it's quality. And that sounds like an odd word because surely we're already delivering quality. We are delivering quality. But one of my strengths is creativity. My two top strengths are creativity and love of learning. And I know that when I'm able to learn, I enhance the quality of our business. So I can bring, so, we're really keen that the work that we deliver is innovative, it's new. We're always looking for the latest thing, what's happening in the world right now, what are the trends, what are the thought leadership around these particular topics. So we're not delivering outdated, training models that are just not fit for purpose anymore, which we still see in this space. So we've got lots of new stuff and we bring a lot of that to it. But last year we were just back to back, back to back, that I felt that I didn't have the space last year to really enhance my own learning so that I could increase the quality of what we were delivering. So this year it's quality is the word, but it's about creating space for my learning so that I can enhance the quality of the work that we are then delivering. So quality is is my personal business word for the year.
That's so cool. Can I ask you a bit of a nerdy follow up to that?
Yeah.
That that question. Um, what's your process for arriving at those words?
So I love that kind of blank slate, new year feeling.
Yeah.
Just like it's one of my favorite things. So sitting down at my desk just after Christmas, just before New Year starts, and just having some space. And I am quite spiritual as well. It's also one of my top strengths. And so one of the things I will often do is I'm really getting very spiritual now, but I like to use oracle cards. And so I always pick four oracle cards to align again some spirituality and personally what do I want to get from this year. And there's just kind of a process that tends to happen where I start to just think about I reflect on what we did last year. So I spend some time just reflecting on the achievements that we had, the clients that we worked with, what really energized me, what did I really enjoy in that year, but also where did I feel some of those gaps were. And quality came out from that. So quality came out from that reflection of, I just felt like we didn't quite have the space for personal learning that I could bring in to enhance the work that I do. And I think it arrived quickly. Quality this year, it doesn't always, but that's the process that I go through. I sit down, light some candles, some nice music. I get my oracle cards out, get the
Yeah.
incense going. And I just spend some time just reflecting on where I've been and where I really want to be this year. And that's why for me the word is better than a resolution because it embodies so much more. It's a feeling. It's what do I want to feel this year if it's successful?
Lovely. Thank you. I think that'd be really helpful for a lot of our listeners who are in that space, just trying to get their heads around that. And I think it does require space to get into that way of thinking, doesn't it? It's not something that you can come up with in between emails, sat at a desk. It does require you to give yourself some kindness and attention so that you can imagine yourself into that future.
Yeah. And the other thing that I do with that, if anyone's interested in, playing around with the concept is obviously once we decide on where we want to be, keeping something front of mind is so vital for helping you to remember that that's your word, that's your North Star. So I also, as part of the process, because I'm a creative and creativity is my thing and I love it, I then spend some time in Canva once I've come up with my words and I create a screensaver so that as soon as I open my phone, those three words are there. Keeps it front of mind, it keeps it visible, reminds me what I'm trying to achieve this year.
Great tip. Thank you for sharing, Emma. So I'm going to move on to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests, which is, what do you charge?
So again, I think this has been an ongoing journey around what we charge. We have definitely landed on a price that we feel really reflects our worth. So we have a very standard charging rate. So we have a set fee that we charge per day, for half a day, and for our coaching sessions. So when we are bidding for work or we're speaking to clients about, future work, we we create consistency in relation to what we charge. However, we do sometimes change our pricing, but for the lower side of that. For example, the NHS, they will not pay the price that our private clients would pay. They don't have the funding for that. So we often will reduce the price of that, particularly if it's aligned with what we want to do and the clients that we want to work with, because we just feel that they should be able to access the work that we do. And we do get we
Yeah.
still do give a bit away for free, as I've mentioned. And now as we've got bigger, we've become more successful. We use associates to support the work that we do. We have a set rate in terms of paying them as well. So depending on what we're earning, we always pay a set percentage to our associates. So again, it feels really fair because fairness is really important to us. It creates that consistency that we're really upfront with everyone if they come and work for us. This is how much we're getting paid. And we pay, I think it's 70 or 75%. I can't remember the exact number, but it's 70 or 75% of whatever we earn. If an associate delivers it, we give that to them. So they're, again, really open, transparent regarding our price instructions.
Yeah. I mean, I probably don't need to say this, but that is, both those things are pretty rare. Both, sometimes the transparency piece is just, it's you just, as an associate, you're just never in that room at all when it comes to knowing what you've been charged out at. But also having a fair split. And actually, I'd say that's more than fair because you're weighting it far toward the person who's delivering it under your banner and trusting that they're going to do a good job for your brand. Being a kind of company, being known as the kind of company who treat their associates well is a really amazing thing to be and aspire towards. And and I don't mind sharing. Having worked with you guys in an associate capacity, another thing that you didn't talk about there is you are very, very quick at paying associates. And having done associate work for other companies, who I won't name, that often isn't the case. Sometimes you have to chase them daily for missed payments or invoices that are months or so overdue, because often you're the last person to get paid if you're the person delivering the work, which doesn't seem right at all, but unfortunately is very standard.
Yeah, well, Chris and I have both worked associately for others, and we know that, we have personally put a lot of effort into making sure that we show up for the brand of that company.
Mm.
And we want, that's exactly right. We want the same for people that work with us and to know that they're valued. because they are the face of your business in that moment. Taking care of people is our is our priority. It's what business is built
Yeah.
on. If we didn't do it internally, it would feel obviously not authentic to us to do that. And I think just that the honest, consistent approach is just a really nice way forward. And I guess anybody thinking of doing the same can pick whatever percentage they want. And it's up to the associate as to whether they want to take that work at the end of the day. But
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It kind of called back to what we were talking about in terms of saying no, because if you make it so easy for someone to say yes and say yes multiple times, chances are they'll always say yes to a request because then they're going to be looked after and treated well, and they'll turn up and do a great job for your business. But if there's lots of kind of negotiation and chipping away at value, you might end up being the person that person says no to because they want to say yes to someone else.
yeah. And as you mentioned about payment as well, we try and pay quite quickly after the delivery of any training, because we also know as a business the importance of being paid quite quickly. And it doesn't always happen, particularly, probably shouldn't say, but the NHS are terrible for it. Like, we've got outstanding invoices from 6-8 months ago that we're still trying to chase and get paid for. But ultimately, it's our business, and any associate working for us shouldn't have to wait for their payment based on us receiving our payment. So we are fortunate that we've been able to build that into our financial planning, so that anybody that is working for us is paid usually the same day or the next day at least,
Yeah.
within them putting their invoice in.
Yeah, I would say again, that is wildly different from a lot of associate relationships. So everyone's thinking to going into this and doing loads of associate work. Unfortunately, that isn't something that you can expect to find. I think Emma's company is particularly unusual on that front. Emma, if people are listening into this and hearing about your background and everything that you've shared over the course of this conversation, and they're thinking, she sounds awesome, how can I find out more about her and connect with her? Where would they go?
So probably LinkedIn would be the number one place for direct contact. If anyone wants to send me a message, they could, of course, email me as well if they wanted to. It's emma@growth-pod.co.uk. And then our website, which is www.growthpod.co.uk. Part of the iteration of building a business is that you set out your website, I think, initially, and then you realize it doesn't really reflect what you do right now. So yeah, if you go there, you'll probably think, who are these people? But it's kind of an old version of us, so we definitely need to update that website as well.
Thanks, Emma. I will make sure all of those are added to the show notes. And thank you once again for joining us on the podcast today. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, let us know by leaving a review on your favourite podcast app. It really makes a difference. And if you want to learn more about how L&D Free Spirits can lift up your freelancing business, you can find out more information at ldfreespirits.com.